Cool. So just moving right on down the line, let's drop down a dot network. And this will be our cool rigid sim. I'm gonna go back into our camera here. And so let's just find, so where should we even bother starting our sim? So it looks like frame 10 is the first time that we see anything happening. So I'm gonna say, start at frame 10. Very good. Dive in, and we'll do what you've probably done a million times now. Packed object, RBD solver, or rigid body solver rather. We'll do gravity. We'll do a ground plane. We'll do a merge. That way the ground plane collides with all this stuff above it. Gravity applies to the rigid body solver. This is this. We can point to, well, now we can just say first context geometry now in Houdini 16. So we can hook it into the first context there. We can see it happening. And actually in this case, we don't want it to source anything in because we're gonna have to add in lots of stuff later on. So let's come back here and I'll just say, let's add a SOP solver. The SOP solver will be what actually ends up bringing these pieces in. So we just add that over here, dive in and say, okay, here's the simulation coming in from here. Let's just add to the simulation that source from outside. So I'll say export relative path to keep it nice and clean. So in this frame, we get these pieces. So new rigids, they're all set up. We already did that. Merge it just with the existing sim. Now right now there's nothing, but you know, on subsequent frames, it's gonna be more important. Put an output here. And remember, we just did this whole thing with the collision ignore and whatnot. And that's fine that they ignore each other at first, but we don't want them to ignore each other forever. So we'll just say like collisions. And on here, we just want to say, hey, the current frame is this. If the current frame is larger than that creation frame attribute that each piece has, which, you know, of course it will be, if the piece has even made it this far, it's got to at least be this frame. But then there's going to be some threshold, or some buffer, I should say. So let's say, let's add a few frames for them to stay in this non-colliding state before they are allowed to collide. And this doesn't really need to be that long. So I'm just going to go that far. So let's do it something like, let's start with 3 frames. So after 3 frames, so let's say this was created on frame 10, frame it is now. So on this first evaluation, is frame 10 greater than 10 plus 3? So is 10 greater than 13? No. On frame 11, is 11 greater than, and this hasn't changed, this will still be 10 forever for the pieces that were spawned on frame 10, and this won't ever change either. So on frame 12, is 12 greater than 10 plus 3? No. Finally, obviously on frame 14, yes, 14 will be greater than the creation frame and its little buffer. And at that point is when we're going to say, okay, well, don't do that anymore. You are now, you will still actually ignore ones that were just spawned, but you yourself will be not in the just spawn group anymore. You've all are all grown up, and you now live in the colliders collision group, which means that these pieces that have lived long enough can now collide with each other. And that's what I want to see. I want to see that some of the pieces maybe roll into each other on the ground. It'll be a subtle effect, but it'll be nice. And as I always say, lots of little subtle effects kind of add up to make one nice looking sim. All right. So that's something. Also going to say, because we're going to use so many pieces and we don't have things resting on each other, sometimes it can be nice to use the parallel constraint solver. So make sure you turn this on. this will make our lives a lot easier. It'll make the sim run noticeably faster. So we press play, and that's what we get. So in fact, I'm going to take this and actually run a little flipbook, and let's review that in a moment.